With an entire generation now growing up with fantasy football, GM mode, and the greater internet at large, it's really not all that surprising that there are so many fans out there who think that they could do a better job than upper management when it comes to running some of their favorite franchises. But are they right? Could it be possible that there are many fans out there who are more creative than, well, professional wrestling creative when it comes to writing storylines? Well, the subject has a lot of nuance, and there are a few things to ponder when discussing it, and that is the topic of this episode. Because today, Armchair Booker. Depending on who you are, this may not be the most flattering of terms. And while there's nothing wrong with a little bit of creative exercise and stretching your imagination, there is something to be said about those who really feel entitled to get their way in their entertainment, and also for those who think that they could do a better job than the people who get paid to do it on a regular basis. And with that being said, I think there are more than a few things that a lot of fans don't take into consideration when they're casting from their couch. Here we have Cody Rhodes defeating Roman Reigns at WrestleMania without Dean Ambrose anywhere in sight. Here we have Roman Reigns winning at War Games without Seth Rollins or The Rock anywhere near the match. And here we have Dominic Mysterio breaking up with Rhea Ripley, and Buddy Murphy had nothing to do with it whatsoever. Now, believe it or not, there were more than a few fans out there who genuinely expected one or all of these outcomes to happen. And I don't mean that they just wanted it to happen, but they really thought that it was going to. And they believed this so much that they were actually genuinely upset when it didn't happen, as they felt it was owed to them. And so, my first point that I need to bring up when it comes to those who cast their dispersions on what they think should happen in professional wrestling is I think I need to make it clear that you are not guaranteed to have anything happen just because you thought it into existence. It is fine to want what you want. It is fine to hope for what you want. And there's nothing wrong with coming up with a storyline that you think is a good idea, as long as that you 100% understand that it is not owed to you. And you shouldn't think a storyline sucks just because they didn't do the thing that you thought they should do. If after this Survivor Series you found yourself mad and saying that this whole match sucked because Seth Rollins didn't come out and The Rock didn't come out, what is this about? Well, you probably need to start putting yourself in check. An angle, a match, doesn't suck simply because something didn't happen that was never promised to you in the first place, and it's really your fault in thinking that it does. Nobody in WWE ever said that The Rock or Seth was going to get involved in this match in any way. And going back to the other examples, nobody said that Jon Moxley was leaving AEW to show up in the Roman Reigns bout, or that Buddy Murphy was coming over from All Elite just to get involved with Rhea and Dom. But yet, there was a fair few of you out there who convinced yourself that somehow these guys were going to break their contracts. And so getting mad at it is on you and nobody else. And I get it, in a world where the algorithm is always doing its best to give us what we want to see when we want to see it, we are kinda used to being catered to. But with that being said, we should do our best to keep in mind that our entertainment medium isn't here to serve us exactly the entertainment we want at any specific time. However, we should also keep in mind that fans are gonna want what they want. Years ago, when Star Wars Episode 1 came out, it was said that one of the major issues is that a lot of fans, as soon as they leave the theater, start concocting the sequel in their own head. And after so many years had gone by for such a popular franchise such as Star Wars, it is safe to say that a lot of fans were gonna have a lot of strong opinions. And while Jar Jar Binks was a very obvious mistake, at the same time, no movie possibly could have lived up to all that hype. Sure, no matter if it's Star Wars or wrestling, it would be impossible for any writer to come up with something that satisfies everybody. But simultaneously, writers should always remind themselves that fans are gonna fan. And while it may not be possible to satisfy everybody, if you don't at least satisfy a good majority of people, well, there's an entire global platform where they can voice their complaints and let everybody else hear it. Now, staying with the mindset of a professional, I really want to emphasize the professional part of professional wrestling, as in getting paid. Because while we as fans let our flights of fancy go anywhere they want to, in reality, the pros have a lot of restrictions and limitations that they have to work with. Money is one of the most crucial aspects of professional wrestling booking, as you only stay in business if you stay in business. And so whether you're crafting your story for professional wrestling or a big Hollywood movie, you still gotta keep in mind there is a budget you need to work with, and you only get to keep your job if you keep bringing in revenue. It's a never-ending struggle. And while you might think that a big company like AEW or WWE doesn't have to worry about cash, well, you would be wrong, because in some ways, it's actually worse for them. Sure, a company that's worth billions of dollars has a lot left in the bank, and while that is true, they also have more expenses and more responsibilities that they have to uphold. For example, WWE, as a large publicly traded company, has a fiduciary responsibility to its shareholders, to its board, and something that I think a lot of fans tend to overlook is that sponsorship is one of the biggest sources of income for any professional wrestling company. And so between your sponsors and your shareholders and your television network, there are a whole lot of people you gotta please before you go around satisfying your own creative endeavors. And fine, your regular old armchair critic is not a professional and doesn't have any of these limitations. But if you're gonna talk the talk, you should also walk the walk and put the same restrictions on yourself that the professional creative teams have. And so this means that some of you are gonna have to fantasy book in the PG era. Some of you are going to have to make decisions purely on a financial basis instead of a creative one. And if you're gonna use the mentality that I'm creating these stories for myself, I don't care about outside influences, I don't care about outside sponsors, then I would say, keep these stories to yourself and stop sharing them on the internet. However, that doesn't mean that I'm encouraging you to do just that. Instead, I'm actually encouraging you to do the opposite. Patreon shout out to all my amazing Patreon supporters, such as Kari Garmin, who once put an armchair in an arm bar, Ron Hawthorne, who could book more than Wan Chi Tong, Mangy Trey, who uses an armored car as an armchair, and Harry Flynn, the fantasy booking rival to Adam Blampier. And again, a big thank you to all of my Patreons, as you are the reason why this channel is still going. Paraphrase Tony Bourdain, who once said that the problem with the types of Rachel Ray and Sandra Lee is that they don't really teach anyone how to cook. They just make it seem so easy that you feel like hypothetically I could if I wanted to, which you won't. And some would say that some YouTube channels have also contributed to this as well, and not just for cooking, but also for those who want to work behind the scenes of professional wrestling. If you really believe you have a passion for this industry, and if you really think you have a talent when it comes to being creative in professional wrestling, then I say, why don't you find out? Put your money where your mouth is. Okay, fine, I'm not expecting anybody to take Triple H's job tomorrow. But if you really do love this industry and you love coming up with storyline ideas, then why don't you find out how far you can go with it? Go to your local independent wrestling promotions and see what they can do for you, and more importantly, what can you do for them? And no, they are not going to give you a job as booker right away, and if they do, you should probably have some questions about that promotion. But one of the biggest things I learned when I started working in this industry for an independent wrestling promotion is just how the cookie gets made. Working up the ladder, earning the trust, and getting to sit in on creative meetings and finding out exactly how this whole machine works. Because I say, if you really are that skilled and you put in all that effort from your armchair, why don't you find out how far that skill can take you? Because after starting there, the sky's the limit. Who knows where you could end up? Just remember that every professional on a creative team out there started exactly where you are now, as a fan who had a bunch of ideas. Maybe you could be the next great booker yourself, as that is exactly how you can turn fantasy booking into reality.